We left off the last time with 2001: A Space Odyssey, and this week we're going to be continuing with
Clockwork Orange.
Right? Very good.
Clockwork Orange.
So,
based on the Anthony Burgess novel.
So we went. So the last episode we went from the future in space to the future on the ground.
Right. This is probably what led the way for a lot of dystopian flicks.
okay, well, why don't you tell everybody, because I know that's probably one of your favorite Kubrick
Well, like
films.
I said, it was based on the Anthony Burgess book. Anthony Burgess, who also wrote Nothing Like the Sun, and he was one of those writers that you could almost said he was like a beat writer, but he was in England, so his books came out about that same time, maybe a little around that.
Well, let's get into what this is Kubrick going back to his low budget roots. This is his lowest budgeted film, I believe, of his major studio works. It's a lower budget film. It's not as high budget as 2001. It's not as big in scope, but yet it really is in a lot of ways because the ideas going on are absolutely brilliant. It has a
beautifully
shot movie, and let's give credit, which not many people talk about, is the wonderful music score by, would it be Wendy Carlos then? I believe it was Wendy Carlos because she was a man at one time.
Malcolm McDowell is incredible in this film.
I'd say it's probably one of the top 20 best acting performances of all time.
I would say so, yeah. I would probably go. I have to think back on what the other ones I would put up there, but he is very good.
Because not only was it an amazing acting performance, but it was iconic.
It's also a great black comedy. There are some incredibly funny moments in this movie.
Well, my favorite moment. Well, let's talk about the actual plot. Malcolm McDowell.
Well, you're dealing with gangs in the near future that this film takes place in. Gangs are extremely prevalent.
Well, in Clockwork Orange too, he uses a lot of masters, and he tells a lot of stuff in his master shots, and I think that really is beautifully composed. Especially the scene in the milk bar, which is the most ridiculous thing I've.
This is where once again he just masters that slow zoom. Right?
It's no longer open, but there was a bar in East Village that was modeled after
the Korova
milk bar. But that's the other thing too. It doesn't really shy away from sexuality either.
No, it doesn't. There's a great scene with an older lady where he takes this wonderful piece of artwork that's very phallic and it's tipping over backwards. It's a very funny.
But I'll tell you something. When I watched this for the very first time when I was probably like 13 or 14 years old, it is one of those films that makes you feel a lot of different things at one time. It is such a complex film, and it toys with your expectations. Now, you watch this for its grindhouse elements. You watch it for the gratuitous nudity. You watch it for the black humor. But he mixes things because the woman that he ends up killing with the phallic sculpture, the yoga instructor, she's not a very likable person. She's fairly obnoxious. And he really puts her up on a weird pedestal, too, to make her seem like she's some intellectual snob.
Well, they all are.
Yeah.
And that's where it becomes, it's not just this exploitation kind of gang, futuristic gang thriller kind of thing. It's really a social satire because all the like when they capture Alex the Droog, your sympathies shift to Alex as they're trying to put him through this whole desensitization sort of program.
And you're rooting on this thug. You're rooting for this thug.
And it's interesting. And the whole thing is no longer about, these guys are crazy and violent. It's like they're trying to cage a wild animal. They're trying to tame it. And that was the whole point. That's why I didn't like the idea of the novel's original ending, that the whole point was you can't tame this wild beast, you know.
Wild horses can't be tamed.
But I think all the characters like that. And there's that whole sequence where he's gone through the whole deprogramming and everything like that, and he goes and he winds up at Patrick McGee's house, and we're always quoting this line: "Would you like some wine?"
Isn't the line, "Try the wine"?
No, it's "Would you like some wine?"
I always thought
I'm almost positive that's
I always thought, "Try the wine."
But he's like this in the wheelchair. "Would you like some wine?"
Yeah, that was my wife's.
Let's just make it 5 minutes of Mike and I doing Patrick McGee impersonations.
He's just sitting
I
there.
love Patrick McGee.
And he's so unhinged. He's sitting there, and his eyes are like rolled back.
Edward, would you like some wine?
Yeah, as if it's like an afterthought as he's eating spaghetti. Your wife, sir? And then you got David Prowse.
Well,
Yes, David
Darth
Prowse.
Darth Vader. Yeah,
and he is basically the
Notice
physical...
the most disturbing scene to me in the entire film.
David Prowse's shorts.
Well, not just that.
Those are very disturbing.
The whole scene where he's being taken through and they're patting him down, they're putting him through the whole thing before they put him in prison, and they give him like the little the rectum exam. That whole sequence to me is the most disturbing scene in the entire film.
I don't know. I was really affected and shaken up with the sensory scene with him. Actually, no, it wasn't the programming scene where they were going to all of a sudden make this character who was desensitized towards sex and violence to become sensitized to it. That was probably the second most. Him encountering the gang that he kind of officially ended, to see these members that he all hurt and injured, to see them take advantage of him like they did at the beginning of the film when they beat up that poor old man.
I want to give credit to Stanley Kubrick for doing something very original, not just the plot and concept.
Would you like some wine?
Try the wine. It was my wife's.
Sorry.
Okay. What I want to give Kubrick credit for, I want to give credit to Kubrick for doing something very daring, which was the slang that's in this movie. The movie is completely full of slang.
That's Burgess.
Yeah, I mean, but no, Kubrick does not try to change it. He puts it in the movie, and yet is able to make it work, where you're not like going, "What is he talking about?" One of the scenes that
a little bit of the old in and out.
Well, one of the scenes that reminds me is like, "Could you scare some cutter for my brother?" And you're able to somehow get it, and it works very well. In fact, if you look online, there's an entire books or like pages of translations.
It's kind of like Cockney rhyming slang, but
yeah, and it works very well.
Oh, I like when he's in the record store and he pulls out some albums, and then he asks the clerk, and he goes, "Oh, do you have any Haircut 100 or Echo and the Bunnymen?" And of course, 10 years later, bands decided to name them their bands those exact names.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of the records. And what's another thing is that the car that Alex drives is called Durango 95, and the Ramones wrote an instrumental song off Too Tough to Die called Durango 95.
And I know that it was banned in Britain after like the first 2 weeks because of
true and not true.
A lot of people say, I think there were a couple instances of fights, but not the breakout that everybody thought they would be.
Here's what happened, because I watched the documentary today. After the movie came out, Kubrick got death threats nonstop, where it was just unbelievable, and he was under a lot of pressure, so he begged Warner Brothers to take the film out of circulation, and it was out of circulation until he died. When he died, they put the film back into circulation. That is what happened. It was out of circulation in England.
Oh, okay.
Only in England.
Because I was going to say,
not in America.
But the novel had censorship issues too. I mean, he was already sort of tempting fate by deciding to adapt that novel.
Also, the
way he did.
When it was released here in America, I can't get the complete story, but it was rated X, and Kubrick didn't. I don't believe he did any editing, but I think he might have sped up a scene, like maybe the scene where Malcolm McDowell was having sex, and I think that's how they got the R.
It was a really interesting period for genre film in general, because you had a lot of people pushing the envelope at that time.
Last Tango in Paris.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm talking about like genre. I mean, if you want to talk about it as a sci-fi film, I mean, look at other sort of fantasy films like The Wicker Man, and you had The Devils, Ken Russell's film. Everybody pushing this envelope on sex and violence. But yeah.
I couldn't imagine any other director doing this and getting away with it but Kubrick at that time. If it was somebody else.
I could see like Ken Russell kind of doing it, or Donald Cammell.
Just not as well.
Well, the problem is, if Ken Russell, he even had his problems on The Devils. He had to cut the film.
No, I know. But the point is that I would see there are directors that would have the guts to do that.
I know Kubrick.
Whether or not they do it as well as
Kubrick was very incensed that he had to pull it. I know he did not.
Well, he did not want to pull it, but he said that for his family, he said that he did not want to leave England, and if something wasn't done about it, then he said that I have to leave England, and I don't want to do that.
We go on to the next film, which is completely opposite.
Yeah, completely opposite. That's the one thing about Kubrick I give credit. This man, it completely changes his style, where you just go, wow, this is from Kubrick? Because he keeps changing his style, and it's an absolute talent, a tribute to his talents. This film, Barry Lyndon, came about because of this Napoleon project. Napoleon was a project he prepared for many, many years, and because another company was making another Napoleon film, they dropped it, and Kubrick was devastated, but he had all this research, tons of research on Napoleon, so he decided to retool it and use it for Barry Lyndon. This film was a very expensive film. He went to Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers said, okay, we'll finance it, but you have to use one of these 10 stars who were very big box office draws. On this list was Burt Reynolds, another one was Clint Eastwood, but the only two that he seriously considered for the role, his number one choice was Robert Redford, and his second choice was Ryan Neal. Both of them have Irish blood, so they would be good. Robert Redford turned them down, so he went to Ryan O'Neal. Now, Ryan O'Neal was a pretty big star because he just came off Love Story and had an Oscar. So they decided to, make this movie around him, and the movie took almost, I believe, a year to shoot, over a year to shoot. And when it was released, it really wasn't that big of a success. Well, it did get critical, yes, it got nominated for Oscars, and everyone loved it, but at the box office, it didn't do as well.
It's a very adult movie.
It's a very adult film.
And I don't mean in a XXX sense. I mean, it has adult themes. It's a very mature film. You have to be patient during the film.
The film is very much in tradition of a lot of literature of the time, by like Thackeray. I mean, it's like Tom Jones, it's a tradition of Tom Jones, Moll Flanders, that kind of thing. And this was based on a novel. I don't think it was Thackeray that wrote it. I could be wrong. I find this film absolutely fascinating.
I love this film.
It's a fascinating film to watch.
People tell me they hate that film?
For some reason, I was like expecting not to.
No explosions.
It was one of those Kubrick films that I avoided watching for a long time. Not because I wasn't interested in the subject matter, but I heard that there were problems with it. It goes on too long. Ryan O'Neal's supposed to suck in it. And I finally watched it, and I found myself fascinated with every aspect of this film, especially going in knowing how the technology invented to shoot this film. I mean, this is a film that he created lenses for, and that he created a film stock that could shoot under low light conditions just via natural light or candlelight, and the film is stunning.
Kind of like what I was saying with what he did with 2001: The Space Odyssey. This man is inventing technology as he's shooting a film. What filmmaker can say that today? None.
What's so funny, though, is that...
No filmmaker can say that today.
What is so funny is that when you hear the name Barry Lyndon and then you see it's a period piece and you see 2001, you go, which one is more groundbreaking technically? You go immediately to 2001. But Barry Lyndon has a very good case because of the lenses that they had to develop, which I believe were from NASA. These Carl Zeiss lenses that could get a really good aperture that they could have just be lit with candlelight. And most people, common person, would look at this and go, well, that they're... But
it's really hard. I mean, for those of you who know how to use a camera, it's really hard to film in low light conditions under candlelight without too much grain.
Especially with film.
And they had to create something so they could do that.
It's a very beautiful film.
And the pains he went to for detail are fascinating to watch. I mean, and the thing too, Ryan O'Neal's not bad at it.
Not at all. Not at all.
He's not bad at it. I would say he goes for like a lazy Irish. It's like a go-to Irish accents Americans would use.
It's a bad one.
But outside of that, he's actually
his acting is very solid.
I have to disagree with you on that. He does. I just watched it again. He loses his accent here and there in a lot of places. It's not consistent.
But he maintains the character throughout and the roguish.
He's not a very good actor. That I can't say he's a good actor, but Kubrick was very smart in the way that he used him because the character is a con man.
Yeah, I was going to say it almost follows Ryan O'Neal's real life personality pretty well.
Well, that's what the genius of this film is and what I love about it.
Barry Lyndon's or I should say, his name in the film is Redmond Barry, but he's the ultimate social climber.
That's what I loved about the film, is that it starts off it starts off and it just segues and keeps moving and moving around this place and you don't see it going there. When he starts off, you see him as this sort of noble guy who really loves his cousin, and then she leaves him.
But he's a noble peasant.
He is a peasant. I'm saying, a noble peasant. He goes into the war. He, then he is a deserter. He goes into Prussia, and you see how he has to become, I don't want to say a con man because that's not a really good term back then. I'd like to say a flim-flam or a confidence trickster. He's pretending to be something he's not in order to survive.
But he's very smart about it though because
he's not.
But like for instance, when he
gets caught the first time.
Our friend Patrick McGee plays the libertine that he sells a sob story to help gain his confidence to move him up the social ladder and allow him into circles he would not have been allowed before.
I would would say that he's smart up to a point. This is where I would agree with Edwin. There's a point where he starts burning bridges and,
Yes.
and not
Yes.
so smart.
Well,
with it.
that's when he's with the character played by Marissa Berenson.
Marissa Berenson, who's stunning.
Beautiful. She looks
So
She
fucking
looks like she
hot.
came out of
Okay,
Top
she
Time
can.
And she was. She
capsule.
was a model. She was a model. I
She
think
looks like she came out of the time
that
capsule
was
from
her
that era.
first acting role.
Yeah, her sister was Anthony Perkins' wife. She is a terrific. I mean, the actors.
She didn't get a lot of play in that marriage, I bet.
No, she did not.
Where are the kids,
But
Susan?
what I like. But let's go back into him going to Prussia. That was one of the things I had is when he's trying to convince the actor I love very much, Hardy Kruger, that he's, I'm the ambassador's son, all this.
Yeah.
And it's just the lies are just so ridiculous. Of course he's going to get caught up in there. Then he gets a little smarter as he goes along and goes, you know what, I got to play this the whole way, where he becomes loyal to the Hardy Kruger character, where he completely gains his trust, and they send him on this mission where he does meet Patrick McGee, by the way, who was nearly unrecognizable in this role with the makeup and the eye patch.
I don't know if he was unrecognizable.
I didn't.
He's got
I
that
couldn't
very,
believe it's him.
I
very
know.
distinct
That
face.
voice is also
The voice,
very
but I mean, he doesn't
distinct.
look at with the makeup. But I love how he's able to keep climbing these social things, and then when you see he meets the lady Lyndon, you really see what a bastard he is for the first time.
Well, don't you think, though, that in the story, what makes it very clear is he's kind of reached the pinnacle. As far as he's ever going to climb, he has reached the pinnacle. He is in a friggin' palace. He's married to a raving beauty. And that's when he starts to devolve a little bit, like, I'm comfortable now, and I can kind of be the bastard that I always was, or that I became, or that I should be. And the bratty son is the one that really exposes this.
Well, I liked the kid who played the younger son quite a bit. The younger one, and then I thought he was actually better than the one who played the older son.
The older son...
he became his assistant.
He became Stanley Kubrick's assistant, but I have to admit, I was rooting against that son because he was such an ass. Even though he presented a great argument on how Redmond Barry was taking
interesting
advantage of the family.
how whether you can attribute to Kubrick or the actor's choices, or is that's just the way the script was written, how you see everyone's point of view.
When I was younger, it's a film that if you can miss it, but as you get older and more mature,
And you know how
really
you love
appreciate it.
talking about like how a certain film we discussed influenced other filmmakers. Well, remember we talked about The Duelists in our revenge film. Well, Ridley Scott was heavily influenced. Sure.
I also like the use of period music. I think it's really well done. I love the way it's done.
I love the narration. I love who I forget who the narrator was, but I love his voice.
I
work in
love the
this.
narration because it kind of sometimes it's not always
It's very
accurate. We already talked about the camera work, but we should mention who that person is. That person, the cameraman, was John Alcott,
Okay.
who worked on The Shining, and then he did. Sorry, it's just a fall from grace. He did Terror Train. Yes, he did. He did
Jesus
Terror
Christ.
Train.
Barry Lyndon, The Shining, Terror Train.
And then I got another one, Vice Squad. Then he died, unfortunately,
Aw.
very early. That's why he did not do Full Metal
Man.
Jacket.
His career trajectory was like the Dirty Harry series. We already discussed The Shining in great detail,
Ad nauseam.
not one but two episodes.
You can see it. We'll put some links at the bottom of the screen.
The Haunted House, one for one. That's where we really get into it. But Kubrick, we didn't discuss why Kubrick did The Shining. He needed a hit.
That's what he said. He said after the failure, because Barry Lyndon did not
He
make
thought
money.
this would give him the hit,
He
afford him
said,
the hit. He was looking for.
He said, quote unquote, I want to do something that is creative but also will be commercial.
Right.
Well, he did achieve 1 out of 2 because The Shining did make a lot of money. However, it wasn't really critically acclaimed at the time. In fact, it won, I think, the Golden Raspberries Worst Director and Best Picture was nominated for it. Which,
And I remember it not getting good reviews at the time.
I can't
'Cause
believe
that's
it.
where I started like my formative years of becoming a horror fan, reading Fangoria magazine.
That was I think when I saw the Siskel and Ebert at the time or read something in the newspaper, the review, and I was just sitting there going, how could they not like this? The commercial's so scary. But John Carpenter's The Thing also got terrible reviews.
Right, but we don't have to elaborate on it. The consensus has changed on that. Even critics who initially panned it have reevaluated
Ebert,
it.
I think, is nominated for his Best
But
Picture
we should
now.
add the most important critic, Stephen King himself, very recently concedes it's a great movie,
But not of his book.
but not a good adaptation.
It's
of
a
his
terrible adaptation of his book, but it's a great movie. After The Shine came out, it was a box office success, and Kubrick decided to make a film on the Vietnam War, and that film was
Waited a long time though. We're talking
7
about
years.
7 years. Yeah.
7 years, which became standard for Kubrick, taking very long between his projects. This film was originally supposed to come out before Platoon, but because of other factors that it took longer. Now, Full Metal Jacket, at the time, was Kubrick's most successful film financially, if I'm not mistaken. It did very well. What
originally cast Anthony Michael Hall as Private Joker.
Yeah, and you know it's
that's right. I heard that.
Yeah, it's true. He saw the Breakfast Club. I believe he saw 16 Candles and Breakfast Club, and really thought he was a unique talent. Kubrick would watch anything, any movie. He loved all movies, and he saw him and really wanted to work with him. But Anthony Michael Hall, of course, was I think really high on coke at the time because he was on Saturday Night Live, but he got kicked off for drug use, as of Robert Downey Jr. So they couldn't come to a term. So they went to Matthew Modine.
Was fantastic in the film.
I like Matthew Modine in the film. I liked a lot of the other supporting actors more. I think that Arliss Howard is very good. I think he's really good, actually. And
Vincent D'Onofrio.
Vincent D'Onofrio.
He makes it. That's his career.
Yeah, and what's
he's done other work, but
he'll always be
Private Pile.
Yes, he will. He will never be able to live that down. That's how wonderful he was in the
film. Well, even more so was R. Lee Ermey.
R. Lee Ermey, who
was allowed to improvise his dialogue, as you mentioned in our last part.
R. Lee Ermey and Peter Sellers were the only two actors, to the best of my knowledge, that were ever allowed to improvise in a Kubrick film. Kubrick planned everything out. Exactly, every T was crossed, every I was dotted. He did not like improvisation. But these two guys, he loved them so much he actually allowed them to improvise. And they said R. Lee Ermey would go around the set screaming all these obscenities, and they would have a person write down the stuff because they didn't want to screw it up from take to take.
A lot of those outdoor outdoor battle scenes. I don't really want to say battle scenes, but the scenes that were not shot in the barracks. It's the second half of the film when they're in the
Battersea Power Station.
Exactly.
For those of you who don't know, some of this was shot around the Battersea Power Station in London. That's the power station you see in the cover of the Animals album by Pink Floyd. That's kind of famous.
Nearly the entire movie was shot in the back lot because Kubrick never left England. He
exactly.
refused to leave England. They said he wanted everything to be shot within where he could drive home at night. R. Lee Ermey said that the reason how they found this power station or whatever was they were driving. Him and R. Lee Ermey were driving down the street. Kubrick. All of a sudden, Kubrick is driving. They have an accident. They go into a ditch and the car turns over. They say that Kubrick just gets out of the car, puts out his glass, and said, "This is it. This is where I want to shoot." And R. Lee Ermey is in shock. But that's the kind of insanity that went through a Kubrick production.
So you were saying, Michael,
if you notice in the film during a lot of those outdoor scenes, it's very overcast. The skies are very gray for almost everything. There was a lot of rain during that shoot. So every time it would rain, everybody would go into their trailers, and Stanley Kubrick would invite certain actors or parts of the crew into the trailer with them to have tea, and they could. Finally, Vincent D'Onofrio asked him, "Isn't this costing you a lot? Because there's these days we can't shoot." And Stanley Kubrick says, "It's not a big deal. I own every single piece of equipment that's being used on this film, so the insurance company is actually paying me on the days that we don't shoot."
The first half of the film concerns new recruits in Parris Island being trained for the Vietnam War. Some of them are going to go into infantry, which infantry means you're going into the front lines and you're just going to be hamburger meat because they think you're too stupid to make.
The first half is
simple.
basic training, and the second half is in Vietnam.
Yeah, and now that's my problem with the film. I love the first half of this movie.
Everybody says the same thing.
I know everybody does, but you know what? They're absolutely right. The first half of this film is absolutely brilliant. And in fact, what's amazing is the first half of the movie, the first part of the movie, you're laughing along with R. Lee Ermey making these insults at the people, but then it takes a drastic turn where you're actually just horrified and repulsed. Of course, the scene that I'm coming to mind with Vincent D'Onofrio, where he has
I am in a world of shit.
Where D'Onofrio has what they call the Kubrick stare. There's a certain type of stare that he looks, and it's one of the most horrifying things.
Nicholson perfected in The Shining.
Oh my God, it's a terrifying scene, and it works brilliantly. But after that scene, it completely becomes a different film. And the problem is the segue isn't really that great. It feels like two completely different films. I like both films individually of each other, but they don't segue together.
I still think that something kind of slows down in the second half. It kind of loses momentum. from the first half. However, there are moments in there like that sums up the philosophy of film brilliantly. Like that whole scene with the sniper. We're all trying to figure out where's that sniper coming from, and no one can find him, and they keep sending people out to do reconnaissance, and they keep getting shot down.
Maybe there's a tad bit too much moralizing. Maybe there's too much emphasis on the quote-unquote horror of war. But the sniper, the whole thing with the sniper is basically the microcosm for the whole Vietnam War.
Oh no, I agree with you, and that's why I singled that out. I would say that my problem with the second half is I don't know if it's because of the way it was scripted or what. It's a little too stylized for me.
And the style
it's a little too. This is a weird thing to say, but this is what comes to mind.
It's hard for me to
It's
ever
very
say,
David Mamet-ish.
It's hard for me to ever say that a Kubrick film is too stylized.
Well, I know, but in the context of presenting something on Vietnam War, and I would say
Are you talking about in the dialogue?
I'm saying something about the dialogue, something about the presentation, something about the performances, and
You mean too stagey?
there's something about it that's stylized.
Like the testimonials?
And this is why it's probably an unfair point to make, because it was released after things like Platoon, and things like that, where now you've come back to the stylized version.
Platoon was the film, and then it was released after, and then after Full Metal Jacket was
all I could say
Hamburger
is
Hill and
I love the first half of it. I like the second half of it, but on the whole, this was sandwiched in between Platoon and Apocalypse Now. And I think there are things in
you mean
Full Metal Jacket.
You mean on a in terms of how to rate it as a war film or a Vietnamese
Not just a war film, in terms of approach. There is a surrealism to the second half of Full Metal Jacket that reminds me of sections of Apocalypse Now, but I think Apocalypse Now does it better.
That's a brilliant.
I like that.
That's a brilliant observation, because I think you're right about that, because Platoon is a very good movie. I like Platoon quite a bit, but it's a very, very straight picture. There's no.
It's a linear film.
It's a linear film. Yeah. Now, when you see Full Metal Jacket, it's a completely different type of film.
When in the second half of that film, at times you feel like you're on another planet.
Yeah, that's my problem. Is that the first half of the film
I don't find it
is
a
very
problem at all.
claustrophobic.
But it's not.
But that works.
And brilliantly.
But I like it. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't like it. I don't think the film's a failure because of it. I'm just saying that just this one thing.
I don't think it's a failure either. I want to make that clear. I like both parts of the film. It's like they're both two completely different films, and they just don't segue together. It's like they're trying to put them together, and they just don't segue together, because it's just very abrupt. All of a sudden, it's like the end of Joker. Remember the scene? It's boom, dead. Next thing you know, they're starting, and they're field reporters in another movie.
So, are you saying you don't like, in the second half, you don't like where it seems like rather than, because you could make the argument that in the first half of the film, it's a linear narrative, like we were speaking about.
Oh, I have
but
no
don't you
problem
feel
with the
like in the
structure.
second scene, it's a collection of scenes?
You're thinking that I have the same criticism as him.
No, I'm asking you both. I'm not
personally don't have
assuming,
a
I'm
problem
asking.
with the first half being this film, the second half being this film. But if I have an issue with the second half, and it's something that I'm going to probably bring up again in terms of criticism with Eyes Wide Shut, is that Stanley Kubrick was trying to make a movie that had already been made, in some ways better, by Francis Ford Coppola, and was already made in some ways better by Oliver Stone.
I don't get the
And I don't think he
I-
brought anything to the table in that second half, with the exception of that sniper sequence, that was any better or more effective than what was already said on that subject.
That's the best scene in that minute.
That's what I'm getting at. Even though I think it's an effective second half, I like the second half, but it doesn't resonate for me the same way that Apocalypse Now did, Platoon did.
Well,
Wow,
you know something?
Really? You think this one doesn't hit? Maybe you thought Platoon hit you more than this one?
But you know what?
I love Platoon, and I still think it's one of the best war films ever made.
Really? I'm surprised you like this Platoon more than Full Metal Jacket.
Why? Do you think Full Metal Jacket's a better movie than Platoon?
I think they're. You know what's crazy?
That's a tough one.
In fact,
It's a tough one.
that second half of the film, if it wasn't for a fact that they're reminding you they're in Vietnam, you'd never think they were in Vietnam, because it's all concrete and burned out buildings and stuff
I said,
like that.
it's like they're on another planet.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, I think the best.
Going back to your question you just asked Eric,
Yeah.
about comparing Platoon. Let's just throw it in: Platoon, Full Metal Jacket, and Apocalypse Now. In a way, they almost feel like films of three different wars. They don't feel like they're all about the Vietnam War. All three of them. To me, Apocalypse Now seems like almost like an adventure an adventure into chaos.
No, I never saw that. In fact, I think the second half of Full Metal Jacket, there's aspects that so remind me of Apocalypse Now. That whole madness, hallucinatory, kind of like almost burlesque take on what was going on in the Vietnam War. You know, the character, for example, the Robert Duvall character would have fit right into that second half of Full Metal Jacket. An almost satirical kind of like approach to, you know, I love the smell of napalm in the morning. You know, you can't surf, you're from Jersey. You know, that all that stuff, all that really crazy stuff.
Well, yeah, I think both.
You have Francis Ford Coppola cameo as a filmmaker.
But for you to say another filmmaker came along and did it better than Kubrick.
No, I think that's my opinion.
No,
I can say that. It's a legitimate opinion to make.
Well, I'm just saying
Apocalypse Now was a similar approach to how Kubrick approached the second half of Full Metal Jacket, and I thought Francis Ford Coppola did it better.
I just don't think Stanley Kubrick made a conscious effort after seeing Apocalypse Now, going, I could do better.
What is that? That has nothing to do with what I just said.
I think they both.
That's an entirely different point.
I think they both conveyed the madness of war very well.
Let me ask you this.
I didn't say Kubrick didn't. I'm saying Francis Ford Coppola already made an impression with this thing, so that impact was lessened.
But you make it seem like it's a copycat the way you're.
No, that's not what I'm saying, and you're twisting what I'm saying, and you know that's not what I'm saying.
Let me ask a question.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm saying if a film is a part of a genre, which is the war genre, especially a subgenre, which is the Vietnam War genre, then you're going to compare one film to other films that are try to tackle that subject matter.
Would you think, though, that okay, let's take Apocalypse Now.
You're saying that you can't compare the films? Is that what you're saying? Is that your point? And ergo, if I compared it to films, then it must absolutely mean that I'm saying that one film is better than the other.
I will say that it is damn difficult to compare Platoon with Full Metal Jacket.
I don't agree.
Think so. Can we tell you what? Even Kubrick announced that. He said that he wanted to rush it out to get it out so the other films wouldn't get confused.
I don't agree, because Kubrick was trying to capture something that was the essence of the reality of war that Platoon displayed, combined with the more surreal elements that Apocalypse Now tried to portray. Two films that nailed both sides of it, I think, more effectively, and they got there before Kubrick's was released, so that by the time Full Metal Jacket came out, that didn't have the impact that those two films had already. That's why that first half of the film, for most people, and not just me, is more effective than the second half.
Yeah, I agree with you on that completely. The first half is better than the second half. Can you give it that, Mike? The first half is better than the second half.
That's not what we're talking about.
Eric just said that.
I'm saying that's why the first half has more impact, because that's a unique take on war. In fact, you want to just blow the whole thing off the roof.
Would you have said the same thing if Full Metal Jacket came out before Platoon?
I would have. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
It's timing. It's timing. I think Platoon. I think that Full Metal Jacket might have.
No, you would have said the same thing.
But I think no.
What you're saying now, you would have said the same thing.
I can't say it. I have no idea, because it depends on what kind of impact Full Metal Jacket would have had it come out before Platoon.
Well, it took Kubrick another 12 plus years to get his next film to the screen, and that film was Eyes Wide Shut. However, it was not his first choice. He was working on two projects. One of them was AI, and another film was one about the Holocaust. The Holocaust film fell apart. And so he decided to do AI. Well, after he developed AI for a while, he said, I'm not the person to direct this, so he gave it to Spielberg.
But one of the reasons why his Holocaust film fell apart is because Schindler's List beat him to the punch. He was developing a film very similar to Schindler's List.
He decided to do Eyes Wide Shut.
Eyes Wide Shut is based on Traum novella, a.k.a. dream novel, Arthur Schnitzler's novella. It was a book that was written in the early 1930s. The movie Eyes Wide Shut pretty much follows it faithfully.
It's not
for a modern adaptation.
Yeah,
they changed some things. They changed the location from Europe to New York. Also,
of course,
the main characters were Jewish, and of course he wanted to change that because he wanted.
But that's an insignificant detail. The detail is that it's a pretty faithful adaptation, updating of the original novel. That's a problem I have with the movie. I will say this. I did see it really recently. It was on, they showed the director's cut on IFC about a month ago, so I was able to revisit it. And I find
Was this the uncut where they have all the nudity in it, or no?
Yes, where they have all the nudity.
That is the director's cut.
And
because that was not.
And I did find myself liking the film a lot better than I thought I originally did. But I still, the one criticism I have with the film still remains. if anyone is uninitiated with Eyes Wide Shut, it deals with like one night in this person's attempt to he has a falling out with his wife. He goes out into the city. He starts to experience all these things, which leads him to this strange party orgy situation that he's not supposed to be at. And I think everything leading up to that is great. And then when he's finally in that so-called orgy scene or that secret sect scene, whatever, it becomes incredibly laughably pretentious.
Yeah, that's my problem with the film. And as everyone knows,
It's like an overproduced Cinemax film.
Kubrick died a few months before the film was scheduled to be released. Kubrick had was very well known for editing his films up until the time they were released. This film to me does not feel finished. It's number one, it's very long, and it's. I understand that they said they wanted to have that for the dreamlike logic of the film. It was supposed to be dreamy and all this, and I
like dream logic.
I do occasionally, but not when it's 3 hours long. Not when it's 3 hours long. I think there's some very good set pieces in there. The scene in the party, there is some good moments in there where he's going around.
Oh, it's beautifully shot, and it's costumed wonderfully, and the interiors are beautiful, but it's like an overly produced Cinemax.
Yeah,
film. I mean, basically, this is the guy who made a Clockwork Orange.
You're trying to make this a criticism. I'm sitting there like, that doesn't sound so bad to me.
Well, I mean, the idea is he is supposed to be exposed or infiltrating something he's not. That's forbidden, and it's supposed to be something that's shocking to him, and therefore shocking to the rest of society. So shocking that they have to threaten him, like almost threaten his life and career, to never tell anybody about this thing again. When really it's no worse than most of the burlesque shows we've seen in New York. I mean, seriously, if you think about it.
That setup, though, where they do end up confronting him in that room, don't you think that was set up really well and it was kind of creepy?
I thought it was creepy, but why is it such a big deal to them? It's not a big. This is the problem. What happens there is not that big a deal.
Yeah, he doesn't know who anyone is.
This is coming
They're all
from a
wearing
guy
masks.
who made a Clockwork Orange. What happens in Clockwork Orange is far more shocking and disturbing. So, okay, he was there. He was in a mask. Nobody saw him. He doesn't know who anybody is. Who is he going to tell? All they could say is, oh, this guy doesn't know
They're
what
all
he's talking
people
about.
in masks. They don't know. It's like, why is he such a big threat? And also, he has the worst luck of anyone I know. It's just like his wife tells him that story, so he goes out. Then that patient of his almost puts the moves on him. Then he goes out.
That was supposed to be the Jennifer Jason Leigh character.
Yeah, and Harvey Keitel was supposed to be the Sidney Pollack character.
And she wasn't the patient, though. She was the daughter of the patient.
Yeah, she was the daughter, and then she puts the moves on him just to happen tonight. Then on the way home, he goes home, and then of course, he picks up The Prostitute by Vanessa Shaw. Then he goes to the costume shop, and then you see Lily Sobrowski about to be,
I don't have a problem with that. That's actually there's a long tradition of it's kind of like Candide. There's this character who's like the innocent person who goes through these misadventures in the course of one night, after hours, things like that.
That's what I say. It becomes after hours.
And that's what the film is supposed to be.
Which is not a put down.
It's not a put down. I didn't have any problem with any of that. In fact, I didn't have a problem with the fact that New York didn't really look like New York. I thought it was great that it was sort of like this dreamlike idea of like this studio bound kind of New York where there's these beautiful shots like the scene where he's being followed and the camera just follows the guy
as that looked like Bleecker Street. I thought it looked pretty.
No. Revisit the film.
I remember that was a heavy criticism at the time. That when he's being followed, and he looks around the corner down the street. I thought, God, that looks like the West Village.
Mike, here's what they do. They get a really good real location for the shot that's really New York. Then all of a sudden it cuts to a back lot and it's completely just
but there is one scene. There's one scene where it does look like, I'll grant you this, Bleecker Street was when he gets the costume. That whole scene where he goes up the stairs and goes in there. That's the one scene that looks like it could be in Soho or the West Village. But the rest of it, like the scene where he knows he's being followed and he goes across the street and the camera tracks the guy, that's like a completely it looks like the Sesame Street set. But I liked that aspect about it. I did like that surreal aspect of it.
I respect a lot of it. I like the idea of the underworld, that being that secret society. I just wish it was a more threatening society, kind of like like the Wicker Man or something.
That's not a bad argument.
It needed to be more.
I want his life to be, because he says your life is in danger. Why is his life in danger? Because he watched some people fuck who are wearing masks and he has no idea who the fuck they are.
And that's where I was really most disappointed in the film. It's like, come on, Stanley, you're more with it than this. You can't think that this is the big bad idea. This is the big conspiratorial thing that's going to be,
the thing that's going to put his life in danger.
This guy's life over.
Yeah.
You could come up with something better than this.
I think when you break down the logic of the film, I think you make a lot of great points. But my thing with the film is I kind of followed the It's become a bad word now, but the dream logic of the film. And I just went with the flow, and I enjoyed it. And you're right. You guys are both bringing up very, very
There's also a big
solid
plot hole.
points that he shouldn't feel threatened in this.
But at the same
But yet
time-
you go along with it, and I just follow
And there's a big plot hole I
the
wanna bring
dream logic.
At the same time, the discipline that's placed on the actors and extras in that scene when he finally arrives at that manor and they're having that big party is actually pretty amazing to
the
watch.
utter stillness of
Yeah,
the
it's
scene.
very well choreographed and it's very it's stunning to look at. But at the end of the day, then you start thinking, but wait a second, what's the big deal? I mean, why?
I don't know if you guys will agree with me, but I think other than maybe Born on the 4th of July, I think it's clearly Tom Cruise's best performance.
I agree with you. I think Tom Cruise is amazing in this film.
And I'm not a Tom Cruise fan,
He
but
really
he's-
nails that upper East Side, West Side,
Piece of
yuppie
shit.
douchebag who thinks he can slum it in the Lower East Side and thinks he's being edgy, but it's totally out of
One
his
thing
element.
too,
Yeah,
I have to mention this. There's a big plot hole. You know when he goes in to find, he finds out that newspaper article and he goes, "Oh, a woman who died, who was a beauty queen." Then he goes to the hospital and he goes, "Oh no, she died today at 3 something o'clock. We don't have any evening newspapers." All right, well, anyway, we got to hurry up. It's a disappointing final film from Kubrick. I believe if he had more time to have edited the
Did you
film.
think it was this disappointing?
I didn't think it was disappointing. I went with it completely, and I enjoyed it.
I think if he had
Not
more
one
time.
of my favorites, but I went
We
with
gotta
it.
wrap this up. I feel if he had more time to edit it, he didn't die, I believe it would have been a different film than
Eric?
what was released.
I think it's not the best Kubrick, but I still think it's worth watching. I appreciate it more when I see it, but I still have a problem with that big reveal.
Yeah, me too. All right, I'm Edwin Samuelson, and this concludes the Stanley Kubrick Show. We hope you enjoyed it. Please join us on the Facebook discussion
Talk
wall.
faster.
And also join us on the YouTube subscription. That's it. Bye-bye.
Mama, papa, mama, papa, mama, 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 papa, mama.